Welcome everyone this morning on behalf of University Career Services. My name is Stephanie McIntyre, Associate Director of Career Education. The topic of this workshop this morning is what is diversity? What is diversity? The mission, vision, and values of employers. University Career Services, we've been very committed to discussions around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and are giving students a roadmap of things to consider as you're thinking about your own values and how that will align with your career path and employment and internship opportunities based on companies. We want to provide you with some thoughts and some things to think about to identify if organizations have the values that are aligned with your own. In addition to myself today, I'd also like to introduce, we're going to have two company representatives speaking this morning, and they are both from Altria. I'm going to give Danielle Mackey an opportunity to introduce herself. She's the manager of learning and development. And so I'll give her the platform just for a few minutes to introduce herself, her role in Altria. And then later on, Quan Schneider, who is the manager of inclusion, diversity, and equity, will also join our discussion. But for now, I'll turn it over to Danielle. Welcome, and thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you for everyone who's joining us. I know Monday morning can just be kind of an ease into the week, so I appreciate you guys taking the initiative and just seeking to learn this morning to get some perspective before your career fairs. I actually started as an intern with Altria many moons ago, and I actually most recently was a recruiter, and I got to partner with UNC and recruit talented students like yourselves. And now I'm in a role where I actually manage the learning and development for our people leaders who then lead our interns and our new hires. So really important emphasis on making sure managers are connected in diversity, inclusion, equity, in addition to the interns and the recruits that we bring in. So really excited to share some perspective with you all today from a recruitment side and how we represent that at campus, and also from an internal side with how we really build that up in our managers, because I think that's also a great area to ask questions about too.
Great, thank you, Danielle. And later on, we'll also hear from Quan Schneider, and we'll also give some great perspective of what's going on in Altria as well. So we appreciate that. I'm going to lay out some things for us to consider as we go through the remainder of our workshop today. I'd love for us to set a great platform by defining with each other what is diversity, equity, and inclusion. We hear this term, we hear these words in many different contexts, and depending on our areas of identity and the experiences we've had, both academically, personally, and also in the workplace, it may have different connotations for us. So we'll start off by maybe also getting some student feedback on how you're defining that. And so in the next slide, I'll ask some folks if you feel comfortable maybe taking yourself off mute and help us lay a foundation for this conversation by defining those terms. We'll then start by talking about the value of your own self-awareness and how really reflecting on your own values sets a great precedence for then what you're seeking and the opportunities, both academically and professionally, maybe even questioning what's important to you and how you want that to show up in workplaces for you in the future. I'll give some tips on how you can search out information related to the core values of different companies and organizations, and what that will mean to your internship and job search, meaning what questions can you ask of employers, maybe as you are networking, as you're going through the interview process and beyond. And what does that research look like? What are some ways that you can secure that information in order to make a decision for you around the types of workplaces you want to invest your time and skill sets into? And at that point, I'll turn it back over to Danielle and as well as Quan at that point for them to insert their own opinions around DEI and how that relates to their organization. If you have questions during our workshop, please put some things in the chat. You don't have to necessarily wait until the end. I'll check the chat periodically to see if there are questions that come up, or if you just want to get them out initially, and then we'll save some time at the end to address those things. So we ask that anyone who feels comfortable taking yourself off of mute at that time, or even off on your camera, so that we can have your voice be part of this discussion. So with that said, if anyone would like to insert yourselves and maybe just share your own perspective, definitions of diversity, equity, inclusion, what comes to mind when you hear these terms?
To me, it means like respecting others and giving the space for others.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. Giving the space for others, respecting. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. Anyone else that can add to that?
I think of like everyone having the same opportunity, like starting from the same place, I guess, and all of their qualities are really taken into account rather than people starting from different places because of things they can't control.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like how you put that things that they can control can often impact the starting point, the starting line for individuals for many different reasons based on representation. So thank you for that. Maybe one last person. Is there anything in addition to what we've shared? A safe space, a place for individuals representing different backgrounds. I'll share some thoughts that I've gotten from many different resources, and in many ways just narrowed it down to its most common denominator. And so I don't want to read to anyone, but I do want to just say certain words out loud so that we all are beginning at the same starting point with these terms: diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the first one, as we think about diversity, diversity includes differentiation, representing a range of what? Cultures, ethnicities, language, religious and spiritual beliefs, gender identity, sexual orientations, abilities, norms, needs, and preferences. So all the things that make everyone different, that is truly diversity. But we want to now take it further, not to necessarily just think about the numbers of what everyone looks like and who's represented from all of their backgrounds, just from a numbers perspective. What do we now do with that representation? If an organization recognizes that there is representation from all of these areas of diversity, which I just defined, what does equity mean? And it is then the quality of being fair and or impartial to all of that representation that you will see within an organization. And then how does that organization recognize those differences, and, to one of the individual's points, create space to allocate resources to reach those individuals for what? Equal outcomes, equal opportunities for success in whatever that space may be. And now let's speak about that term inclusion. Again, I'm just narrowing it down to the most common denominator because we're going to explore these concepts some more. Danielle will reinsert herself back into the conversation. I believe Quan Schneider just got on the line as well. Welcome, Quan. We'll have some time also for you to introduce yourself in a minute. In fact, I'll allow you to do that in just 1 second. Thank you. But just wanted to then, I think she just came in again. So I'll wait a second for Quan to come back in the line. Inclusion, a set of norms and behaviors, or we can think about this as a workplace culture that encourages all individuals to feel what? Valued, seen, and heard. That doesn't happen just because there are numbers that represent all of the areas of diversity, but that now there is a standard to make sure that there are resources that allocate and recognize all of the different norms, needs, and preferences of different identities and representation. Quan, if you were able to get on the line, I believe you're here. Welcome. Would you mind just introducing yourself briefly, and then in a few more minutes, you and Danielle will have some time to speak some more.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie, and good morning, everyone. Apologies coming in a little late here. I am Quan Schneider, and I'm a manager of inclusion, diversity, and equity at Altria. And I did want to preface, so this is North Carolina. I am a fellow alum of a different ACC school, and really happy to be here with you all, and look forward to more of our conversation. Just so you know, just a little bit, I've been with Altria 23 years. I was an intern and came right out of college working in our sales force. I've done all sorts of roles in our sales force, moving from Virginia to Florida and back to Virginia, along with learning and development, training all our new hires that have come into our sales force, and now in this current role. So I've had a plethora of experiences that I'm really appreciative of, and happy to be here with you all today. Thank you.
Welcome, Quan. In 23 years, yeah, I think you can teach us some things. So thank you so much for that. Let's start off by talking about self-awareness. As I speak to groups of students and individuals alike, I always set the standard by saying that it's very hard to make decisions around anything if you don't know a little bit about yourself first, right? Once you know, or a lot about yourself, it's easy to then capture information about different work environments, academic setups, and things like that that may be aligned with your areas of interest. The same thing is true when you start to think about your values, which is nothing more than what's important to me in this space and time in my life. And as you're starting to think about that, couple that with your internship and job search. What's important to you? How do you want to show up each and every day, not only to class, but in the work you're doing outside of the classroom or upon graduation, in which you're then full-time committed to an industry? And if that's the case, let's start with that common denominator. What are the parts of your identity that really drive the way you show up in this world each and every day? Think about and be honest with the areas of privilege that you may have based on just societal norms. What are some of those ways in which parts of your identity aren't fully represented in the media, in society at large, or isn't always fully accepted or understood within facets of society? Having an understanding and a recognition of that can help you navigate different environments more of a present way, fully understanding your own significance. And then as you tie your name to organizations and the type of work that you know you do well in and that you feel fully committed to, you can answer the question of what's important to you. You want to make sure the organization and the work that you're truly doing is tied to that significance, however you may define that, whatever your value system truly is. And then how do you wish to experience work? How does work really define? Does work really, is it part of your identity? Does it define who you are and what your level of commitment truly is to the totality of who you are? This is very personal for each individual. Each individual, you want to define that differently. And so I won't put anyone on the spot to define that because that is so personal. But as we go through this conversation today, really ask yourself about your identity. How does that drive the way you show up each and every day to campus and to class? And how is that going to continue to shape and grow as you get closer to graduation and into the workplace? I just wanted to put up this slide as an example that really for every company or organization, it will define its mission. An organization, even this university, will tell you what's important to it. So I was able just to find this mission and value statement for the university. You'll be able to find this on your own, so I will not take time to read this to you. But I wanted to give this as an example because whether you're interested in Altria or any other company or organization, you'll be able to find something on that company's core mission, value statement, or something that will give you some understanding of what it stands for. At least that can be a starting point for you to identify its alignment with who you truly are, so that as you get engaged in further networking with individuals in that organization or part of your job search as you're interviewing, you will be able to ask some more in-depth questions to identify if its mission and value statement is truly how that organization operates on a daily basis. And we'll get into just maybe some specific questions you can ask and some types of information you can look up to make that determination. And we'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes. And so I mentioned that with really any organization's website, you can find a few different things. In their About Us section, you'll be able to find something on mission, vision, and core values. So make sure to be very intentional, particularly in the next couple of days. Many of you are about to be attending the internship in career fair on the 16th or the data analytics fair on the 15th. Or if you're just engaging in your job search for employers that are on Handshake or beyond, a great starting point is to go right to their company website. In addition to that, another place that you can find some really accurate, detailed information about organizations are through their LinkedIn page. And sometimes organizations are even more intentional on their LinkedIn page than their broader company website in speaking about things like their corporate culture, their mission, their core values, and such. So that's always a go-to, a great go-to as a starter. Identify if there are specific affinity groups that you would want to be a part of. And then look on organizations' websites to identify, have they developed any specific groups related to an area of your identity or a specific mission or value system that is tied specifically to areas of your interest that you may want to be further engaged in. As you are going through interview processes, speaking with employer representatives at our fairs and beyond, this is again another great question to ask. Ask things such as, what type of training will I be provided in order to be successful in my role? Is there opportunities for growth and for me to develop skill sets in areas that maybe I don't necessarily have in these moments? Understanding a company's level of commitment to these areas are also part of just diversity, equity, inclusion. How do they commit to the talent that they are onboarding, not necessarily just once you get into the position, but long-term? Most organizations will be able to either they publish up front or will be able to share with you information about employee demographics from a racial perspective, possibly from a gender perspective and beyond. You can learn more about how individuals within different subgroups have they been in the organization for a short period of time, or have they had long-term success in an organization such as Quan being at Altria for 23 years. You can ask questions such as, do you see racial minorities, women in leadership positions? And what accommodations are provided for individuals, maybe from a religious standpoint, the ability to have flexibility to engage with family and to have a work-life balance. As you're thinking about these things and looking at these types of questions and thoughts on this screen, think about how you can incorporate questions around these topics as you are researching organizations, being engaged with company representatives at organizations of your interest, and most particularly when you ask appropriate questions during your own interview processes. I'm going to look in the chat because I think someone mentioned something. How can you ask an employer specific ways in which they carry out their values? I would love to hand it over to Danielle or Kwan to answer that question about other ways that a job seeker can identify this information.
Great question, Caroline. And hello. And I think that's really important to ask employers, because a lot of times they can have great values, but you want to see that it's more than just words on a board or words that they're advertising. So I think asking for like tangible examples of, can you share with me an example of your company living out some of these values that you're mentioning? Or also asking them, how does the company emphasize these values in training to new employees or to their managers? And can you provide me an example of what that looks like? I think it's pretty common that there's corporate speak. And so I think getting to tangible, specific examples and not being afraid to ask further. They give you some broad response and you're like, that wasn't necessarily like a direct example. I still have to ask again, okay, so what did that look like? I think is totally valid to ask and helps you get a true line of sight to their values at play in day to day. Kwan, I don't know if you have anything else to add. Oh wait, still muted.
There we go. Unmute. There we go. I actually started typing and then I was like, let me stop typing. So what I will say is, Caroline, that question demonstrates to an employer that you're doing your research, right? That you have, like Stephanie said, gone onto our intranet site or LinkedIn or whatever, those sites are, and that, okay, you care, right? And then, as you're talking, just like Danielle said, ask that specific question. It is okay to be direct because we appreciate that and we appreciate what you want. So those questions, they demonstrate, I think the passion and your energy of what you're seeking out and what you want to know before you select a company that you want to work for.
Great. I'm going to drive home.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Any other questions about specific things that you should be looking for, or specific things that you can ask that really shows your commitment to doing the research? Anyone else before we turn it over to Danielle and Kwan? All right. After we hear from Danielle and Kwan, I'll also give us some reminders about searching Handshake for job opportunities, as well as registering for our upcoming fairs. But I really want us to now shift our attention to our company representatives that can speak a little bit more about how Altria shows up in this space, and using this maybe as an example of questions that you can ask of other employers based on your own areas of value. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to you both.
Thank you, Stephanie. So Kwan, I'll kick it off just for some context of Altria, and then I think Kwan really being a specialist and in now a department focused on this, I think we'll be able to add a little bit more color. What I just want to emphasize is, I know you all are very busy. You're jumping on this call. You guys have class. You're preparing for career fairs. You probably have a lot of workshops with other employers. I would really encourage you to pause and take the time to truly reflect on what Stephanie was emphasizing of what matters to you. So often between constantly being on our phones, email, Zoom, we don't actually kind of settle down and do that heart reflection of like, what experiences have I had? What can really fire me up? Or what do I find kind of hurts me if I see injustice happening in? And pause and reflect. And I recommend journaling or somehow writing down this, because it helps you really absorb that. So that way, when you're at career fairs or you're in employer workshops, you're not just on the line of path of what they're sharing with you. You already know what you're looking for and what you're anchored in. And I would really encourage taking, even if it's just 15 minutes of like quieting the noise, put your phone on do not disturb, put your computer down, just take a moment to truly think, okay, what really does matter to me? And then what I would say in prep for transitioning to Quan is keep in mind grace, giving grace to companies, giving grace to anyone you interact with when it comes to inclusion, diversity, and equity. It is a journey. And that's one thing that I really appreciate about Altria is they say, hey, this is our ID&E, or inclusion, diversity, and equity journey. No one is at a perfect state. That is not possible. We're all human. We're all going to be working towards it. But what I think what is so important and looking for in companies is, what is your plan? Like, do you have an aspiration? Are you aiming for something? Or are you just saying, hey, we love to embrace diversity? Like, well, how do you know you're doing that? You know, what are the metrics? So that's what I just encourage too is don't come at them very harshly in the sense of, hey, say there's opportunities of kind of battering in that or eliminating that as an option. What matters, in my opinion, is do they have a plan? Are they trying? Are they on that journey? And that's where you can ask those intentional questions. That's where training comes into play. Roderick, who is the director of your career services, wrote a great article about, hey, are companies transparent about metrics? Think about with you all, how do you know if you're doing well in a class, if you're succeeding, or if you're falling short before the semester's over? You have grades, you have stop points, you have metrics. So does a company have metrics in their inclusion, diversity, and equity, or is it just very broad? So that's just what I would encourage too, is giving a company grace and, hey, if they're not even the strongest leaders in it right now, are they on that journey? But also, how are they marking that journey? How are they intentional in that? So I want to turn over to Quan to really speak to how Altria has created intentionality around this when we realized there are opportunities, including the department, which she's a part of, and in creating new roles and intentionality around this. Just any advice she has on how you can really kind of pull that out when you're talking to different employers you're considering.
Thanks, Danielle. And first off, I did want to mention career services. When I was undergrad, I maximized our career services team and department. We even had like a 2-credit class around career planning. So first off, kudos to you all for being in this conversation, and thank you to looks like Stephanie and Roderick for facilitating and having this too, because it is so important to ensure that the students coming out of UNC are fully educated on how to select where they want to go. It's such a big decision. And I'm going to refer a little bit back to Caroline's question about values, and Danielle saying, write it down. I think what's amazing is when we as employers speak with potential, candidates, and you talk about what values are important to you and how what we do at our company aligns with your values. I mean, that is like the best of both worlds and, coming together. And so I truly appreciate hearing that. And so I just wanted to add that onto how I answered earlier. But so I've been in our inclusion, diversity, and equity team for 2.5 years now. But as I said earlier, 23 years with one company, right? It's sometimes rare to hear that in some companies, but I will say at Altria, it is not rare. We have, I know someone at our company for 40 years, and it's amazing I'm like, I was like, I'd want to retire, but hey, more power to them to be able to continue with the work that they're doing and leading bringing such passion to their role. So with that, what I will say is I have seen the ebb and flow over these last 23 years at Altria of the culture and the focus on it. And like Danielle said, every company has a journey that they are on. I do not believe that it ever ends, just because the environment, the world changes. And to the point of values, if at that moment what you are looking for, if it does align, then that's amazing, right? Because you're not always going to find that. And at Altria, our journey of the inclusion, diversity, and equity before, this team was actually just inclusion and diversity. And we focused on how do we ensure that employees feel welcomed and feel included, and that we have a diverse mix of employees at Altria. Now, since I've been with the company, we have, and I think Stephanie, you talked about some affinity groups. We have now 12 employee resource groups. And that's actually my core role at Altria, is how I support and amplify our employee resource groups. Besides that, we also have interest networks and professional groups at Altria. And they are a game changer, I will say, at Altria. They like I said, ensure that folks feel welcome and included with the various communities that we have. And you don't need to be within those communities for the ERGs. You can join to learn more, right? Because we are all on our own journeys, and it's amazing. And I've always said this, that when you have a company that will invest in the culture, and you have free access to it as an employee. If you had free access to anything, why wouldn't you? And to have that at Altria at your fingertips, and a great way to network with more people outside of your day-to-day, it provides you those channels to be able to do that. Danielle talked about also metrics. And if you go on our internet site and you go to people and careers and you go to the inclusion and diversity page, the first thing you see is inclusion and diversity aiming points. So we have set our standards, our objectives, right, on, hey, how do we want to get there? What do we want to look like in 5 years, in 10 years? And so setting that and putting it out for the public to see keeps us accountable. And so we are continuing to measure that. I literally just got off a call with our one of our larger departments and spoke to our people leaders because we are in that time of the year where it's performance assessments, and we have something new called our advocacy model. And it is, in lack of a better word, assessing, right, your journey and where you are as a people leader. And so you can be rated as an advocate, an ally, someone that is just aware, or inactive when it comes to inclusion, diversity, and equity. And so it makes people feel very uncomfortable because they are being rated around, this topic. But the most uncomfortable things, because it's brand new, will lead to bigger things and better things. And we are all learning still, but we have at least put that in place to support our people leaders and overall our culture at Altria. Because if you are identified as someone that is just aware, right, where I know things are going on, there are inequities, but it's not my job to do anything. Is it? It is. It is your job to support the culture of Altria, support your employees, and and all your colleagues. So, what are those things that you are doing to support that, to improve our culture? So I wanted to provide you some examples of what Altria is doing in that space. I feel like I've been talking a lot, so I'm going to just pause and see, Danielle, if there's anything you think I haven't touched on.
Well, Quan, we got a great question in the chat from Lisa. So thank you, Lisa, on what are metrics you expect to see beyond just numbers of diverse staff, how to measure the actual inclusivity of an employer? And that is a great question. So I think what Quan just touched upon, that's something that we do internally to assess if someone, is an advocate, an ally, or aware. Keep in mind, some of these things might not be posted as external. We reference that advocate, ally, and aware on our external page, but the metrics aren't shared, given this is new as well. But Altria also does internal surveys, like employee experience surveys, and that we hold leaders accountable for, and we anchor in core areas within inclusivity, within equity. And once again, that's not shared externally, because that's things that leaders then are accountable for and really seek to work on opportunities or strengthen great areas. So that's not shared externally, because that really depends per department. But the fact that we have a survey in place shows that we're checking the pulse. So I think that's a valid question where you can still ask. If you don't see it on the webpage, even if they don't communicate how they measure that, ask them, do you measure other elements besides diversity? And then if they have something in place, they can speak to it. And I love what Quan said originally. It shows that you're looking, it's showing that you're doing your research. So don't think of it as too forward. If you're asking very directly, it shows that you are honing in on what you know. So ask him specifically, if you don't see it on the internet, how do you measure inclusivity within your employees, or how do you measure equity amongst your different employees? Quan, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
That's perfect.
Quan and Danielle, can you share a little bit more about ERGs, employee resource groups? What is the role of having these types of groups within an organization, and how does it support and elevate individuals?
So I would be that person to answer that question, since that is my day job. So first off, what are they? Okay, so I'm gonna relate it to the world of college, right? And I mean, in essence, think of them first off as clubs. You can join any club, at UNC, but why are you joining them, right? Is it because you want to learn more about what that club is, offering, or is it aligning with, your interests, your values? Are there people and things within that club that are similar to your interests or similar to you, right? So I'm sure there are more reasons, but those were just a few. So then let's look at employee resource groups. Now, employee resource groups were developed, I believe, in the 60s and 70s. And it was a way in a company to feel more included at your workplace. Because if you go through the mentality of this is just work, right? I'm not bringing my full self to work. I'm just going to do my work. Well, we aren't then really maximizing on your talents that you bring to the workplace. And so what happened was somebody thought, you know what, there should be a way for you to be able to bring your true self to work. And so employee resource groups or affinity groups were developed. And so, some of the examples are within the certain communities. We have Black ERG, Latino ERG, Asian American. We also have one for veterans, disabilities, a couple of women's ERGs. And then we just created a new one for interfaith. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few, but those were just some. Now, saying all that, right, as you come into a company, you're always going to have your immediate colleagues, right, that you work with, but there are going to be so many more people that you may not get to interact with, and you are just focused on doing your work. But with the culture of a company, it is more than just your immediate job. And what employee resource groups do is really support, one, the strategies of the company, but secondly, they support the employee, right? As the employee, there are going to be needs outside of your day-to-day business that employee resource groups can support. So it could be, right, looking at career development. Yes, you can talk to your manager, but in an employee resource group, you've got colleagues from all over that you can network with, that you can then talk to, ask questions a little bit more, feel a little bit more comfortable, and really look at, or talk to them about their experiences. And so these ERGs allow for that. They also, so coming up at Altria, we have September 15th in 2 days starts Hispanic Heritage Month. And so we get to celebrate together because we're all virtual for the most part. And our Hispanic Employee Resource Group has a series of events that will help celebrate the people, the culture throughout the month. And so we are, amplifying it through different communications, not just to members, but outside of their membership to various employee groups. We have National Coming Out Day in October. So those are the things that ERGs bring to the table to support our employees, to amplify the community and the culture, and then really just to add to and makes the culture within the company great. So I'll wait there. Hopefully, Stephanie, I answered your question.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Quan, for that information. Also, Danielle, thank you for putting the link to the ERG page and the careers page as well for all of us. We much appreciate that.
Of course.
Yes, Danielle or Quan, would you be able to share some information on how does Altria's commitment to diversity show up possibly either in the recruitment process, and how do employees of the organization welcome conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion when there are students and other job seekers, maybe just networking with company representatives? What may that look like?
Great question. And I'll speak to that coming fresh off the recruitment trail last year. So how we monitored diversity, inclusion, and equity was from the diversity standpoint. We looked at what is the diversity of all students at universities across the country. And then we have key partner universities, UNC being one of them. And we looked at and say, hey, does this university's diversity align with the national average? Are there some areas obviously where there might be more, like our HBCUs, which are historically Black colleges or universities? They're going to obviously be over-indexed in some areas. And then our other universities substantially under-indexed. So what we did was we said, hey, out of the schools we're at, is our blend representative of the population of students? Because we don't want to be only at schools where it's really lacking in diversity. And then we're looking at ourselves like, oh, why aren't we representative of the population? So we look at that from a diversity standpoint. Then what we also have are metrics. So you'll see majority of companies when you apply, and you can choose to opt out, but you say if you're male and female or what you identify as. You're able to mark what your ethnicity is. So we are able to use that data, not individualized per person, but we can see it broadly and say, hey, what was the diversity of our applicant pool? Who made it to screens? Who made it to panels? And who got offers? And did the diversity stay consistent? Or are we eliminating unintentionally a certain ethnicity group or over-indexing in an ethnicity group? So this holds us accountable to be aware were there any unconscious biases when it comes to diversity through our recruitment process and our interview process. Then we also look at offer acceptance rate. Hey, what's the diversity of people who accepted or declined offers? We want to make sure that we don't have any trends coming up to say, hey, are we not connecting with certain audiences? Then we go to the inclusion and equity part. We administer surveys during the internship to once again keep our finger on the pulse. How are these interns doing based on broad experience, the intern demographics? And we were actually able to uncover that students that were also, when you think about economic diversity, that maybe came from, they were first generation college students. They weren't professional career individuals because they weren't reared that way by their parents. We found that, hey, there's a disparity in their experience. They maybe weren't as refined in corporate jargon or didn't understand the corporate setting as well because their parents did not come from that. And so what we then implemented is we got to train our managers how to communicate differently, how to encourage differently individuals from other audiences. And we only were aware of that because we were surveying and getting honest feedback. So that's why I like to emphasize the importance of a journey. No one's perfect. It's so long as you are seeking to learn more, so you are aware of your opportunities and then doing something towards that. So now we actually have manager training for managers that are going to be taking on interns. So they are aware of, hey, you got to be cognizant of different cultural backgrounds, of different upbringings, different economic diversity to make sure you're supporting your employee the best. So I'd say those are the areas within our recruitment process, especially internships or entry-level employees, that we're really focused on keeping our finger on the pulse for diversity, inclusion, and equity.
Danielle, you said it best. This is a journey. This is education for everyone from every facet of life. It's wonderful to see an organization leading the way and mirroring what individuals need to do in order to grow and be very cognizant of the world around us. So thank you so much. And I don't know if you had anything to add to that or maybe some other thoughts.
There we go. Well, there's a lot. I feel like I need to stream. Are there other questions, Stephanie? So that way we make sure we get to them too.
I had one final question, but I'm going to open this up to any students. If anything that we have shared thus far, our guests have shared thus far that you may have any specific questions around, feel free to either put that in the chat or take yourself off of mute. Anything at all for Danielle or Juan?
Must have lost our chat.
All right, I think I just saw someone in the chat. I'm going to read a question from someone. Summer is asking, I would assume that companies are going to paint themselves in the best light. Are there any red flags that we should look for in our search, or is it a matter of finding a company with listed values that best match what's most important to you? So yes, you're right. I would say no one would want to show the downside. So are there certain things that students should still be aware of to get kind of an understanding of what the reality truly is?
I would say just coming in that, let Kwan go from her internal perspective too, but from a recruiter standpoint, I'd say, yes, spot on. Obviously, we're going to say, hey, what's best about the company? But a red flag, I think, would be, and it goes back to what Stephanie talked about, self-awareness. There's self-awareness in companies too. Are they overly portraying only positive? And when you dig deeper, do they acknowledge any opportunities? Because everyone, whether you're human, an individual, or a company, we all have opportunities. So I'd say that could be a red flag because there's got to be that awareness of, yes, we've got some areas, but we are working on, and here's what we're doing, which kind of ties into the second piece. If they acknowledge their opportunities, can they speak to how they're measuring it or what their plans are to improve that? Or is it, once again, just idealized, generalized vocabulary that they're using that's very aspirational versus tangible for how they understand maybe what their female percentages in leadership, and are they working to advance that, or women that take maternity leave, things relative to that. I'd say those are two red flags. Kwan, I don't know if you have anything else to add for the next question.
Yeah, that's great, Danielle. One way you could ask it could be around the challenges that a company faces, right? So if you're having the conversation or you've talked about things that you've seen on the intranet, ask about what are some of those obstacles, what are some of those challenges when it comes to your organization or for your business or whatever it is. I think that opens the door to have a more in-depth conversation and kind of going down that rabbit hole if that is something that you want to learn more about. So I just wanted to give you that approach to be able to open that door.
Yeah, thank you. I'm seeing another question in the chat, and this is very specific, but maybe we can look at it specifically, but also just think about, the work that different corporations actually carry out and how that work may be controversial depending on who the audience is. So Isabella is specifically asking about the tobacco industry, and just based on diversity, individuals may have different opinions, and just the tobacco industry as a whole could possibly be controversial for some individuals. So thinking through that lens, or if you just want to touch upon in general, just based on people's vantage points around what they find acceptable or not, how does diversity or an understanding of diversity come into play with that?
Isabella, courageous question. Thank you for asking, because that is something that's on everyone's minds. And that was on my mind when I was looking at companies to enter. I'm like, tobacco? What? No, I'd never envisioned myself working for a tobacco company. But that's where learning more about the values and the people. And what's interesting is because it's such a controversial company, we emphasize values that much more. Because if you're going to be representing a product that causes harm, but it is an adult decision to make, just like alcohol, just like a lot of things where as adults, you come to an age where you earn the right to decide if you want to make these choices. We want to ensure that we are employing people who have the utmost values that are going to provide it in a responsible way. So that enabled me to say, hey, you know what, versus some careers that are maybe very prestigious, but the people care more about the prestige than they care about the actual service or good that it's doing to the people or employees. That I think shown through to me. And then what I also would encourage is if you go to our intranet or to the external website, the first thing that you see is our 10-year vision is actually moving beyond smoking. So recognizing, hey, this is a harmful product. Adults have the right to choose. We're not just wiping it from everyone's options. As an adult, once again, you get to decide what you want to spend your time and resources on. But what we want to do is provide better alternatives that have far reduced risk. So we want to be able to give adults options to indulge, but in ways that are significantly less harmful to them. So if you go on our homepage, you can see how that SEA vision is shifting actually tobacco consumers away from smokable products. So I think that's another thing that's interesting is seek to understand more about the company and the people than just the product. You might say, hey, don't envision myself in that at all. But if you dig deeper, and honestly, who better to change a very controversial industry than the leader in the industry themselves? So I think there's a lot of power behind that in being a part of that journey and that shift. So I want to commend you for asking that question, because I know that can be a difficult question to ask. And Quan, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
I'll yes and just a couple of things that Danielle that's different from what Danielle said, because I absolutely agree with all of that. From an internal standpoint at Altria, there is, all the corporations are focused on the acronyms, we love acronyms, is ESG. So it's environmental, social, and governance. And clearly we are in the social space in my day job. And as we think about the social impact, there are things that we are also doing from a supplier diversity standpoint, and ensuring that, as we partner with other companies that, provide services to our company, we look at the diversity and the makeup of those. Our consumers are quite diverse, right? And then also, Danielle and I were in the sales force, and like our retailers, the individuals that sell our product are quite diverse in that standpoint too. So because of the mix, yes, absolutely controversial industry topic, all of that. And I remember when back in the day when I was helping with recruiting, I always would be very upfront to say it is not for everyone. So it is okay if you make that decision that this is not for you. But if you do make the decision to explore more, let me tell you more. Right. And that's when all those other questions will come to fruition. But that is the first kind of question and hurdle that you'll have to make for yourself, especially in this industry.
Great, excellent. Danielle and Quan, thank you so much for your perspective with that question and really just with this entire conversation. We appreciate you sharing those links so that students can really use your organization as an example and do some research on your website based on the information that you disclose and share around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we really appreciate that. We have your contact information that we've also shared as well. So thank you for allowing our students to access you if they have any questions. And we know that they can always search more on Handshake and on your website to learn more. I wanted to also make sure that students are aware and reminded of our website, careers.unc.edu. When you click on this resources button, an entire world of information is unfolded to you, specifically Handshake. We want to make sure that you're on Handshake, that you've updated your resume. It's visible to employers like Altria as well as you're posting as you're applying for internship and job opportunities. Please make sure that you are aware that as a UNC student, you already have a profile on Handshake. So you want to access with your onion and password. When you go in there, you will also see all the information for our upcoming career fairs. You can also click on the news and events button and get reminders of that as well. This week is a busy week for us. Tomorrow is our part-time job fair. Wednesday is the analytics fair. And then our biggest day of the semester is our all majors career and internship fair. If you have yet to do so, make sure you're going ahead and registering in advance. Why is that important? Number one, because you'll get guidance as to how to navigate Handshake, our online platform, for the virtual event, and really take heed of the information that we provided. We've already gone through our Q&A throughout our dialogue today, but utilize that list of registered employers as an opportunity for you to really put into practice some of the things that we just shared. What do you want to research about the organizations? What questions do you truly have? Those are the things that are really important to make sure you're making the best decisions around which companies you want to invest your time in. Quan, thank you for saying that we can connect with you on LinkedIn. Also, what I'm going to put in the chat is our post-workshop survey. If you're still on the line, I want to make sure that we get your feedback. This will take just a couple of minutes so that we can make sure that we touched upon the best information for you as you are making decisions around your next step, whether that may be an internship, a job opportunity, and navigating with employers at our fairs this week. I'm going to go ahead and start recording at this time. And I thank you all. Thank you everyone for